Hello, everyone. Welcome to another lecture for English 2090 Film and Lit Online here. Today, we're going to go into a lot of kind of interesting and important dynamics when we get to other ways we could dissect literature and film. So, we're focusing on what's called queer theory, which is basically critical studies in sexuality. So, let's define what we're doing. So it's an offshoot of feminism. So it comes through the political, social, and theoretical lenses of feminism. What queer theory does is it tries to attack the homophobic and oftentimes patriarchal basis of heterosexuality. So the major premise is that the dominant heterosexuality binary, so masculine, feminine, you know, which prefers two sexes and which casts other sexualities as abnormal, illicit, or criminal, is based on cultural assumptions and ideological constructions. So when we break that down into kind of more standard terms, right? So basically, what we're getting into is this idea of heteronormativity, that heterosexuality is the presumed normal sexual orientation. And so it's an important aspect because it really investigates aspects of why people feel the way they do about sexuality. Now, queer theorists investigate how ideology of heteronormativity dictates the formation and recognition of identity. So we're getting into identity politics and all these kind of important aspects that Curtis's Malinoche will get into. So just to define, a little bit self-explanatory, but if you've never heard the term before, heteronormativity is the belief that people fall into distinct and complementary genders, so man, woman, and of course with natural roles in life. It asserts that heterosexuality is the only sexual orientation or only norm, and states that sexual and marital relations are most, if not only, fitting between people of opposite sexes. And I love this Google image because it really defines heteronormativity for us, right? You know, how we think that blue is always boy, pink is always girl, which wasn't always the case. Again, dresses, right? You know, clothes, right? All these distinctions, right? Frills versus, no frills, right? All these kind of distinctions with colors, dress, ideas of ornamentation, right, all go into our ideas of heteronormativity, what a real man should be, what a real woman should be. And so what queer theorists investigate is how that's all based on culture. That's not based on any kind of uh, you know um, absolute truth. It's only based on axioms and, of course, cultural identity. Just to kind of show you how heteronormativity works in terms of culture, right? Think about this just in terms of blatant culture. We have, again, man in dirty boots, right? We have the woman doing domestic work, right, in this ad. And this is a new ad. This isn't anything I pulled from, this is right off the website, right? So this just shows the kind of dynamics that occur. Again, notice the daughter giving the mom the flowers, right? And how they're dressed in yellow and purple and yellow, right? And he's dressed in, earth tones, brown, green, and blue, right? Subdued colors, right? Very masculine colors in terms of heteronormativity. And we see these dynamics time and time again. Look at the assumption here. Now, again, this is a new franchise, teen adult literature, Smart Taz, right? So he's the hot quarterback every girl wants, but he messed with the wrong nerd. Notice again the heteronormativity here, right? For literature, right, when we assume that every girl is heterosexual, right, heteronormativity. So again, in advertising and literature and culture, we always see heteronormativity in play, right? How people presume that heterosexuality is normal and ever present. Again, another just ads are easy, just the shape of the perfume bottle, what he's wearing versus what she's wearing, the color schemes, everything that we see, right, in terms of reinforcing heteronormativity, right? So, time and time again, what theorists look at is how film and literature, of course, for the purposes of our class, reinforce heteronormativity. One of the best examples of recent cinema, if you haven't seen it, that's fine, but it's so easy to pick on this idea. Um, Star Trek, right? So the newest Star Trek franchise is a great example of heteronormativity. Why? Because of the poster, right? And she's not a main character. Imagine if we just had the real three male leads, right, advertised on a character. And again, forgive my poor Photoshop skills, but I don't need to be a graphic designer. So This is the difference, right? We need something to reassure people, right, that it's not a gay movie, right? And time again, you see mainstream cinema do this. This is a great example, too, because time and time again, every character is shown to be heterosexual. It's reminded to you time and time again that every main character is not gay. And this is done for a lot of mainstream cinema even today. And it's a crucial aspect. And there are a couple reasons for it, especially with China driving a lot of revenue for Hollywood now because of their anti-gay bans and so forth. There's a lot of movies that are either cut with their gay characters, or there's movies that just reinforce time and time again heterosexuality. He's giving a backstory of an ex-wife. We can't give every character a romantic interest, right? Because that would take up too much time. But even characters who don't have a romantic interest, he's a divorced man, so we know that's our introduction to him. He's divorced. Oh no. This dude here, the engineer, well, we can't give him a love interest, but he has this quote in the movie: "She is one well endowed lady. I'd like to get my hands on her ample nacelles, if you'll pardon the engineering parlance." So again, we reinforce that. Oh no, this character isn't gay. He's by himself in this, Arctic. I forget, like kind of research lab with this alien who's also a male. But guess what? They're not gay because he likes women, especially if they're ships. And then, of course, even the villain, has to be shown that he had a pregnant wife who died. So guess what? He's not gay. So, what movies do time and time again for mainstream audiences, a lot of times to make people feel comfortable, they'll reinforce, again, the not gays. Same thing, too, right? We have even a movie that plays around with sexuality a lot, but how do we advertise? Well, there's a sexy lady. So, guess what? These characters aren't gay. Even when we have a very kind of homoerotic pose, we throw a woman on the cover because guess what? We're not gay. So, this is a very important aspect when we come to cinema because time and time again, even in modern cinema, you would assume that, oh, there's a more progressive Hollywood. No. Time and time again, Hollywood, for mainstream audiences, reinforces their movies, right, to show that these characters are not gay and that there are no gay people in the movie. And if they are, they're going to be background characters only. So this is an important aspect when we get to cinema studies and, of course, literature as well. So, what queer theorists also focus on then is, of course, the subtext related to homosexuality. So, what instances of homosexual relationships exist in the text or the film? Are there homosexual characters portrayed or presented? And then, of course, how they are portrayed? How do homosexual characters define themselves? And this is a crucial aspect. If you've ever seen Boondock Saints, we have a gay character, but guess what? He hates gay people, right? So it's a really important dynamic because, yeah, we have a great homosexual character who isn't really defined by his sexuality, but time and time again, he refers to his sexuality as bad. He talks about how perverted gay people are and so forth, right? Why? To reinforce the audience's views, the audience's perspectives. So, how homosexual characters view sexuality and homosexuals is also crucial, right? Just because we have a gay character doesn't mean we're going to have a strong gay character, right? If the lesbian hates lesbian characters, well, what does that say, right? About not lesbianism, about how people perceive lesbianism. So, how do other characters react to homosexual ones, and all these things, and how is homosexual absent from the work? So, as we really focus on this work that has a huge idea of homosexuality, think about how these characters are constructed, both in the film as well as in the literature, right? Are these characters great characters? What is the author and, of course, then the director saying about homosexuality? Another aspect that queer theorists trace is a very important aspect called homosocial and heterosocial bonds or homosociality. And this means same sex relationships that are not romantic in nature or sexual in nature at all, friendships, mentorships, other kind of rivalries, and so forth. The opposite of homosocial is heterosocial. So people who prefer non sexual relations with the opposite sex. And even this in psychology and sociology is crucial. So, like, why do people just want to hang out with men? Why do people just want to hang out with women? Right? Do you have a mix of friends? Think of yourself, right? Are your friends more one sex? Are your friends multiple sexes, and so forth? So when we get to literature and film, how do characters act around the same sex, right? What do they talk about? What do they do? How do characters' speech and mannerisms change when they're in a group of the same sex as opposed to a mixed group? How do characters define their relationship with members of the same sex? Is there a woman character saying how, oh, all women are terrible, right? Because that happens a lot in movies as well as TV and so forth. So what does that mean? And then what are the character's preferences, right? To be with the same sex socially or to be with the opposite sex socially? Because it matters. And think of yourself, right? Do you prefer socially to be with one sex? Do you prefer to be with the opposite sex or a mixed group and so forth? So this again shows how we create not just sexual bonds, but also just social bonds. How do we feel about same sex bonds and then opposite sex bonds? A great, again, movie when we are looking at homosocial, right? And of course, if you've seen this, you may have heard jokes too about the homoeroticism. But in terms of the homosocial aspect, Lord of the Rings is a good example. You get a dominating epic with mostly men, again, the Fellowship of the Rings, all men, right? So you get important kind of homosocial relationships time and time again. And so it looks like when we trace kind of the history of film, there's a lot of male homosocial stories being told, even though they're not necessarily homosexual, but there are a lot of homosocial stories being told. So what are the gender dynamics? What are the dynamics between these groups and so forth? Even when we get, again, a very important aspect with the female versus the male Ghostbusters, look at the advertisement. Women can't just be on the cover. We always have to throw in a man, right, because of our uncomfortability with gender roles. So it's a very important aspect, and this is what kind of queer theorists look at. Again, another modern movie and novel, The Help, a lot of that work is driven with homosocial bonds, right? How do people navigate bonds both with different ethnicities, but also different classes, right? And that's generally what the foundation is for the novel and the film. So again, looking at these homosocial bonds are crucial. Now, we're getting into where homosocial becomes more homoerotic at times, and that's where kind of another aspect of queer theorists get. But even Fast and the Furious, like when we look at the homosocial bonds, right, it's all about family. So how is family constructed, right? Not just by blood, but by friendships and so forth. So again, that leads into, because oftentimes, those are the jokes, right? They trace subtext of homoeroticism. So homoeroticism refers to specifically the desire and attraction to the same sex, which can be momentary, and that's what's very important. It's not it can be a lingering lust, but it can also be just momentary infatuation, and that's kind of an important aspect, especially when you get to visuals in art. It involves undertones or even sometimes overtones of erotic images and dialogue that reflects homosexuality in some form. I'm going to pick out comic books because they are ripe with homoeroticism at times. So we have an issue from Justice League of America in 1966. So we have our villain, not only you are doomed, but so is everyone else you have touched. So we have our little Adam guy, I forget his name. Gene Loring, I've signed your death warrant. We have Flash, I gave Isis West the kiss of death. We have our Green Lantern, Carol Farrow in Deadly Danger. So all three female love interests. Whom does Batman think of? Robin. What have I done? Right. So we get this kind of important aspect that we see time and time again with homoeroticism. Again, a good kind of clip here. Why are they tanning naked together? They could easily use separate rooms and so forth. So what queer theorists trace are these moments that what do we see and what does it mean when we get these kind of homoerotic scenes, right? That okay, what do we do with this subtext? And again, you look at the decades, right, of homoeroticism within the Batman comics. Wonder Woman 2 is no exception. We could pick on her, right? Think of these two clips, one from 1944. So on Paradise Island, where we play many binding games, this is considered the safest method of tying a girl's arms. And then another classic quote that you probably won't find in modern Wonder Woman movies: if girls want to be slaves, there's no harm in that. The bad thing for them is submitting to a master or an evil mistress like Paula. A good mistress could do wonders with them. So, and if you research the context of the Wonder Woman creators, and you'll find why it's also dripping with this as well. But it's very interesting that, there, when we are confronted with image of homoeroticism, what do we do with that, right? Because there's not really, it's not blatantly homosexual, but it's clearly homoerotic. So this is what oftentimes queer theorists trace in films, And so think about, all the films that we've seen that are very homosocial, the literature that we read that are very homosocial. Think about movies where scenes were maybe erotic, where you have, naked men together, or men showing off their muscles and so forth. And, there's an interesting dynamic here in terms of why those images exist, especially when movies try to preserve heteronormativity. So there's an important kind of clash of ideals. So in terms of the lasting kind of focus that queer theorists discuss is, of course, the ever-changing dynamic representation of what we call still the queer community. So it could be lesbian, it could be gay, it could be bisexual, pansexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, intergender, asexual, and even ally, right? And that's why the plus is always there, because it's an ever-changing spectrum. And so this is what, of course, queer theory studies, that changing spectrum. And so that spectrum is going to be also crucial for how this type of theory focuses on, issues of bisexuality, for example, because bisexuality is often kind of dismissed, in real life as well as in art. So it's kind of important to look at the politics, the social aspects, the religious aspects going on with these kind of ideas. And this is just a good graph in terms of, like, looking at how ever-changing definitions of gender, sexuality, romantic interests, gender expression, and so forth are changing throughout the kind of contemporary context. Obviously, if you have any questions, always submit them to the Canvas, or email me. Again, we'll think about these concepts, and we'll revisit a couple of our previous works to kind of look at how these concepts are in place. Again, best of luck to you with the rest of the semester, and take care.